Okay, looks like we got a good number of people in here, and um, the attendance has slowed down a little bit, so we can go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. Today, we're going to go over what is a complete reservation application, what is an acceptable work plan, and what is a complete issuance request. And your three presenters are going to be myself, Diana Bagdasarova. I am the program analyst for historic preservation working at OEDIT, and I will pass things along to Christopher Fortney for an introduction.
Good morning, Christopher Fortney. I'm the Senior Program Manager for Tax Credit Administration here at OEDIT. Sarah?
And I am Sarah Capel, and I work over at the State Historic Preservation Office, and I manage the historic preservation tax credits at both the state and federal level.
Excellent. Thank you both. Now, before we get truly started, just a few housekeeping things. As attendees, you are not able to use the chat function. However, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A that is at the bottom of your screen, and we will answer those throughout the webinar. And then if there are any questions that are consistently being asked, we will take care of those if there is time for a Q&A session at the end. Okay, wonderful. Christopher, do you want to get things started, or Sarah, would you prefer to?
I'll get us kicked off if you don't mind, Sarah. So today, for some of you, this might be a little bit repetitious. And having said that, there will be some repetitious points that we're going to make during this, and that is actually intentional. We have had a lot of problems with some of these issues, especially this last year, as we've had a lot of new applicants join us. So there seems to be a little bit of confusion for some things. So if we do repeat, I'm sorry, but we are making sure that we're very clear and that people do understand. As you will find out as we go along, things will be much different when pools open in January. We will probably not be nearly as forgiving and working with people as we have been this year, and we'll explain those reasons as we go through. But mostly it's been because it has taxed our time quite a bit to try and work with this stuff, and it's caused a lot of late decisions that I know has been painful for a lot of people. So we're trying to clean it up for everyone and make it fair for everyone as possible. So that's kind of the basis for why we're having this today. We are going to have webcasts every quarter, and we try to make them as relevant to what's going on as possible. So as many of you know, we will have new policy documents and new documents coming up before the new year, because we do have some new rules that came through legislation last year that you're mostly aware of. And it hasn't made its way into our official documentation as of yet. So we're working on that now and having that stuff finished up so that we can get that to you well before the end of the year. Our last webcast for the year will be in late November or the first week of December. I'm not sure which yet. We'll let you know with plenty more time than we did this time. I apologize for the short notice. We've been extremely busy. But we will be going over a lot of the new rules and stuff closer to November. So we thought we'd take the time today to really go over what is a complete application, because it really does matter. It slows down things if people do not have a complete application. For us to wait and gather that information means that other people are waiting because of the statutory rule that we must look at things in a first come, first serve basis. And so that really comes down to these questions and why we need to start denying applications that are not completed. We've been really friendly about it, but we're learning that we just absolutely can't, because it's actually making people wait longer than they should have to. So we really need to clean it up. So that's the basis of what we're doing today, starting with our statute in 7A states that the office shall separately reserve tax credits in the order in which it receives completed applications and rehabilitation plans. So this is not a new policy. This is basically getting back to what the statute has always required of us, is that we accept complete applications. So we want everybody to understand what that means so that they can successfully enter a complete application without it being denied right off the bat. This means that an incomplete application may be denied or will lose their place in line until the application is complete, and we'll explain that more. So the elements that are necessary to start off for a complete reservation application are, you're going to need all these things. You're going to need a comprehensive work plan, accurate ownership or lessee information. If it's a lessee, you'll need to provide your developmental lease agreement. You'll need to provide relevant construction drawings, schematics, or other illustration clearly indicating all structural components to be worked on. Before photos of all the structural components to be rehabilitated, you'll need now to give us the signed power of attorney as required, and signed ownership statement of use. So the power of attorney might be a little bit new for some folks, but we want to let you know that we have realize that as you use third-party brokers and stuff, when they check the attestation box, it really is not telling us that the owner of the property or the qualified lessee is actually attesting to anything. So if it is a third party that is handling your application, they will need a power of attorney from the eligible owner or lessee to act on their behalf, so that we can accept paperwork through them. So that's kind of a new requirement, but for a very old reason. And then the signed ownership statement of use is not always required, but in most cases, if you're going to have any type of living quarters, we'll need you to sign one of those, and those are specific, so you can look those over at the time when you get them. What we mean by a comprehensive work plan, and we're going to go into this as a deep dive, but this is just the introductory part of that part. Submissions without a work plan or plans that are vague, missing narratives, or cost estimates will be immediately denied. So if we get an application and it just doesn't have a work plan, we're going to deny it, and you can reapply. And again, the statute allows for you to reapply with a new application fee. But we cannot, if you don't have a work plan in there, we just can't hold a place in line for you. You need to start again. This is also, I think it's important to add that we have had several applicants put in what we call place saver applications, which means they know that the pools are only going to be open for a limited amount of time. So they want to get in. And so they start an application and they put the bare minimum in, they pay the fee, they apply, but they're missing their work plan, they're missing photos, they're missing things. That's why we're denying this right off the bat, is because it's just simply not fair to those who are ready to apply and ready to be reviewed to wait behind people who are literally just holding a place in line. So that's part of the reason we are having to clean house. Submissions needing additional clarification or information will be placed in a draft status. And that means you've basically given us everything for a complete work plan, but we're unclear about something. And so we're asking for some clarification, or could you provide this additional document? Those things aren't immediate denials because you did give us a full plan. We just need more information. And we do give you a grace period of 10 days, business days, to get that done. If not, it'll be placed in draft status. And if we cannot get that within another 10 days, that will end up in another denial as well. And again, this is because we're not allowed to review applications ahead of their turn. So we can only wait so long before we will need to deny and go on to the next person. So your priority, if that happens and you get placed into draft status, it means that your priority number is now in the open, and it will be reassigned when you reapply. So if people have applied while we've been waiting for your paperwork, they will be ahead of you in line and then when you do resubmit, that is the time and date that we'll mark, and we'll put you as next in line at that point. So understand that putting in a place saver does not necessarily help, because you will lose your place in line if we do not have all your information. And then again, if we do not get it after that 10 business days, we will be denying the application, and you can reapply when you have all of your information. So the accurate ownership and lessee information. Property owners need to upload a signed and dated warranty deed or similar, depending on what deed you have or whatever proof of ownership you had. If it's a purchase agreement because you're acquiring the property, you'll need to provide us with the signed and dated purchase agreement with a clear effective date of when that ownership will take place. For lessees, you'll need to upload an effective development lease agreement with the owner of the property. It must be a single effective lease with a duration of 39 years if you're in an urban area, or if the building's in a rural area, it'll need to encompass 5 years. We do check these. You do not need 5 remaining years. If you've got 3 remaining years, that's fine. We just need to know that you actually have a single lease for at least 5 years, or 39 if you're urban. We do check at the 18-month progress report and the following progress reports to make sure that you are maintaining that lease. If it is expired, you are no longer eligible for the credit. So please keep your lease agreement up to date, as it will come up in progress reports. And again, just real briefly, I know I kind of already explained this, the signed power of attorney. This is a signed valid power of attorney must be submitted. Otherwise, the attestation is invalid and the application will be denied. So who needs to worry about this? Who needs to supply a power of attorney? Any contact assigned to an application that is not a legal decision maker for the qualified applicant. And the qualified applicant is obviously the legitimate owner of the property, or as we just discussed, a qualified lessee, right? So if you're not directly a decision maker for one of those, you will need a power of attorney from a decision maker to give you permission to make decisions in the system on their behalf. Any contact that is a legal decision maker for the qualified contact must make this statement in the notes of the attestation page or upload a statement. And that's what I mean is that where that checkbox is for attestation, where it says additional notes, you just simply put in there, I am the CFO of this company, or I'm the COO of this company, or I am the owner of this company, and therefore I do not need a power of attorney. And that's good enough for our records to show that you are a decision maker for that company. If you forget to do that, we will reach out to you and just have you email a statement that we can put on file. Signed ownership statement of use. This is an ownership property use statement. They're custom depending on which pool you're in. They'll be available for download in the program webpage prior to the pool opening in January. So you'll be able to locate it on the webpage and download a copy. Our hope is eventually to get that into Salesforce. I don't know that we'll be able to get that in before January. So that's why I'm letting you know. We'll make sure that there's one available on the webpage for you. If you can't find it or something, just go ahead and reach out and we're happy to send you one. If you're in the housing pool, that will have information specific to that. If you're not, it will have other information specific to your project for you to sign. The statements are necessary for all projects with income producing activity related to residential dwelling units. Whether you're in the housing pool or not, you're going to need one of these statements. There is a separate form for projects in the housing pool, as I just mentioned, and that one will have more of a clear breakdown of square footage and things like that. Otherwise, they're very similar statements of use. The idea is to make sure that everyone knows and we are clear that at the end of your project or phase, there will be commercial ongoing income producing activity. And that is the point of the statement, is to make sure that we're all on the same page before we even get to the reservation stage. So it's important to know that applications missing any of these critical items, the comprehensive work plan, accurate ownership or lessee information, relevant construction drawings, schematics, or other illustration clearly indicating all structural and architectural components, the 4 photos of all structural and architectural components to be rehabilitated, the signed power of attorney, if necessary, and the signed ownership statement. If you're missing any of these, we're going to deny it immediately, okay? No question about it. You can reapply, but we're not going to look at incomplete applications any longer because they take too long to process. Next slide. Okay, so why are we being so strict? I've kind of tapped onto this already. Applications submitted without all required items are often only placeholders to ensure submission of prior to pool closing. We're trying to prevent the fair treatment of, sorry, that's worded really long. We're trying to defend the statutory requirement for the first come, first served element. We're trying to make sure that stays fair and equitable to everybody. If you have put in a full application, you don't deserve to wait 90 days because other people have not. That's kind of the crux of that. This causes delays in reviewing all applications. And so that's, again, why we're doing this. And it unnecessarily burdens the office, making the 90-day stipulation almost impossible to fulfill. As you've seen, we've had some people take, up to 3 months to even respond to requests for additional information. So we are unfortunately in a position where we just simply cannot give the leeway any longer. Is this you, Sarah?
I think I put my name down for these, so
Right. I'll let you
well,
take it over.
thanks, Christopher. And I want to emphasize what Christopher introduced us for this session is we are going to be very repetitive and it is for all of our, sanity. So on the next following slides, we're going to go over the necessary elements for a sufficient and complete work plan. We really want to emphasize that all the work at this phase of the reservation stage should help to make your issuance stage easier to complete. Following, we will provide examples of work plans, planning documents, and before photos. So starting with the slide identifies the difference between a single system install or the installs of systems. If you're not phasing your project, then your work plan must include a full description of each system to be installed throughout the building. If you are phasing your project, the install of systems must be clearly stated. If you say the systems will be installed throughout the building, then we expect all systems to be completed at the end of that phase. No exceptions. If you say, well, I actually didn't get to it, nope, it's all done or it's not. So you can't be moving a portion of a system to the next phase because it really doesn't make make much sense when you say that you're going to install all the mechanical, electrical, plumbing in one phase. Oh, next slide. Okay. We do expect the work plan to be broken down in a way that describes each component or space in its own feature. If you are putting kitchens and bathrooms, then you will need to include information about the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing needs that are pertain to those spaces. This will also help you clearly show you are in fact installing or doing work in bathrooms and kitchens, and it isn't lumped into a more general component such as first floor finishes. This allows you to separate out your unit and tenant needs while also having the opportunity or remembering to break out systems such as fire suppression, since it is a very specific component and need of your project for a complete rehabilitation. This slide you will see later, we've come up with a work plan template and an example of various project stages of a project. But these are things that you will need to be, including in your work plan. And one of those is, what is the current condition of that feature or component? And we need this so we can understand where you are starting from. You will need to clearly state the current condition of each component, such as, is it historic? Is it non-historic? Is it in poor, good, excellent condition? Is it, non-existent? Like, are you missing a whole second floor flooring cover? Maybe you just have subflooring in place. What is the class of repair needed? We oftentimes see this in windows, whether it's we just need to scrape and repaint, versus, we need a whole new window, versus also, what is that window going to be? Is it going to be aluminum clad in wood? Is it going to be a new wood window? Key items that help us, be able to review your project as to whether it'll meet the standards or not. So on this slide, we have master bedroom. We talk about, the plaster ceiling is in good condition. The wood floors are in poor condition, and there's no wood flooring on the second floor. If you're looking at the four walls of the bedroom, the north wall has significant damage due to water leak, while the other three walls are intact. And then you have windows, they're in various conditions. And this is where, we'll want to know if you have lots of windows, we're going to expect a window report. If you have a few windows, then maybe we won't need as much of that needed information. So then this is where you're going to outline and follow up on what you said the condition of it was. And it's just easy to follow it. If you do it in a bullet point, if you do it in a narrative paragraph, just make sure you are covering each thing that you told the condition about. You're going to tell what you're going to do. So as we noted, the plaster ceiling was in good condition, so there's no work to be planned. For the floors, they will be repaired where needed, and you will match the historic flooring. So you're not doing a luxury vinyl tile, you're not pulling it up and putting carpet. The north wall will be repaired, retextured, while the other walls will, just be repainted. And that's important to know as well, because if there's no work to be done, we're going to want to know that. But, we also expect if one wall was damaged, then instead of having one wall look all fresh and new and the other walls look like, ooh, there's some like kind of staining or whatever, that a fresh painted coat would cover, like that's needed. And then you repair two windows by just doing a simple Dutchman repair because they really weren't all that bad, with new glazing. And then you install two new wood windows. This one, you'll hear us harp about it some more, but we have to review a project as a whole to ensure it meets the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. So we can't have you doing one thing over here that meets all the standards and is perfect, picturesque, while on the other side, you're ripping everything out and it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna make this look all modern and forget that historic wood finishes and everything. So if we do not see a description for a component, or if you didn't state no work will occur, we will need information pertaining to that area. So I will ask, well, you didn't say you were doing anything on the second floor, but there's clearly a second floor. Like, what are you anticipating doing there? And maybe that floor doesn't need attention. Maybe you're just doing the first floor, the second floor was done, 10 years ago. That's all we need to know. We just need to know why you're doing that. So you cannot pick and choose what gets reviewed and what meets the standard. So again, if you just hate those finishes in one area, you just can't rip them out. So we will need, photos of even those areas that aren't part of the necessary rehabilitation, just to ensure that you're not trying to pull a fast one on us. So a photo map isn't in the past, you've probably never submitted a photo map, some of you all, but it's not meant to be a burden. But we have noticed that we have been getting a lot of projects where they just take one photo here, one photo there, and there's no rhyme or reason as to the order of those photos. Can't tell, oh, I'm in a dark hallway. I have no idea which hallway this is. So this can be easily accomplished with just having a basic outline of the building and a floor plan, and with numbers, just with a simple arrow pointing, what direction am I supposed to be looking down that dark, creepy hallway? You might know your building like the back of your hand, but we don't. We do try, to come visit you on site, but that doesn't mean we're going to remember every little nook and cranny. So once you start dropping in random photos, it starts to get messy, and I just start having more questions. Another good tip is to also add in a description as to what you are wanting us to look at. So if it is an up close photo of a window, then put notice the wood rot or see the detail of the window trim. Planning documents. So planning documents are not a requirement. However, most projects need some level of planning. If your building is in great shape and the work is minimum, then maybe all you need is a well-written work plan and maybe a few pages of design documents. If you're needing to basically do a complete gut, you're going to need a full set of comprehensive construction documents. If you are one of the few doing a phase project, then maybe a mix of comprehensive construction documents for phase one, and design documents for phase two and three. So whatever helps support your statement as to this is a phase document, this is what I am anticipating for each phase. Make sure that your construction documents align with that and is clear. If we find that you are missing or believe well, Christopher's already done this, additional documents exist, so construction documents were on that list with the drawings, we will ask you. We have been very nice in providing extensions for getting us information, but if, I find that construction documents are part of my review and are critical for me to be able to complete it, then as stated before, it could be a potential draft or a straight up denial, just depending on what your situation is. So going back to the examples, you'll need to understand what your complete project is. We do also understand that CDs could be under development, but if you are doing a major project, you have some sense of what's going on. So either you need to have a well-written work plan, since the work plan now will take precedence. I'm no longer going to take a one sentence work plan and then have to rely on going to your construction documents or whatever you've provided as supplemental, to figure out what all you're doing and whether your project will meet the standards. It has to be in your work plan. It has to be written narrative. Is taking, as Christopher said, us too long to review projects. And then also making sure that your written work plan and your construction documents all align. I don't think we can emphasize that enough. So we're not relying on one thing, but you need to make sure they all align. So if your work plan says one thing and your construction documents say another, and you're like, but my construction document said this, I don't care. If you do it based on your construction documents and it's different than your work plan, could be a denial. So another little component that people forget, and could be the difference between being in queue and missing that close, is estimated cost. Seems so simple, but it is actually such a critical item that really we look at. But we also understand, like, or we want you to understand is for your own well-being as well. Like, you're taking on this project, and we want you to have a realistic understanding of how much this project could cost and per component. So if you come in and say, "Oh, my elevator is only going to cost 30,000," we will laugh and we would be like, yeah, that's not reasonable. So we do look at these costs and we do, question, oh, you're saying it's only gonna cost this much, but reality is it's gonna cost more. So we're really gonna start diving into what work are you doing, and whether this is a sufficient work plan for a complete rehabilitation. So now, we did put together we've had discussions, just based off of how this past January applications have gone, where our pain points have been. And so, on each of our parts, we've come up with new resources. And so we have created, or it's in the works, but we will create a work plan template that will be fillable. And then based off of that template, I've created work plan examples and then planning documents and before photos that are good examples of what we, would like to see ideally and what would really help our review. So now that we have discussed everything that goes into our work plan, we have received feedback from applicants that would be helpful to have a work plan template. We also noticed that there are many variations of work plans we were receiving, but there were a lot of missing critical information and resulting in multiple follow-up emails, confusion during our reviews, and even denials. Based on these reasons, we decided to create a work plan template that could be used for the state historic preservation tax credit applications only. This is not a substitute for the federal. This is not a substitute for the residential tax. This is for the commercial tax credit program. While it is not a requirement to use this template, we do highly recommend using it. You will notice that the template was designed to be the best of all worlds, or at least in my opinion. This template takes into account elements from the State Historical Fund, Exhibit A, or the Federal Historic Tax Credit Work Plan, and combines them into one. So that way, if you're pursuing one or both, you can easily combine that information into this template without recreating the wheel. Starting in January, we will expect that your work plan includes all the items we have in this template. I did notice I did not update the one screenshot, but you'll see in my work plan example that it is updated. But you want you to identify the feature, condition, proposed treatment, photos, drawings, if applicable, and estimated cost. You will also, we have also added in a section where each applicant has to declare if their project is going to be one or multi-phased and provide a statement as to why their project specifically meets the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. Again, it's just repetitive. And that way we know that from the pre-qualification to what you're talking to OEDIT and all this information, it all aligns. So you're not saying we're doing housing or we're doing a restaurant, like it's all going to the line. There's going to be no questions. And I do want to point out, like, there is, a narrative asking about how you meet the standards. When you do your pre-qualification and your reservation application portion online, you're already checking a box that you understand and agree to the standards. So this is just a written explanation of that. And then in a couple of slides, we're going to provide the work plan, and then the plan photos and the planning documents. And then I will say, if we continue to see projects that submit applications with insufficient work plans, this template will become a requirement. If you are creating your own template, do a triple check that you are including all required components of the work plan, or state that this project does not need X, such as planning documents. So you will notice that this project, to do 3 phases, and it was approved by OEDIT and HC. This supports our prior statements on 1, coordinating with our offices as whether your project makes sense to phase. 2, you must complete what you anticipate per phase and must fulfill that work plan. And 3 gives us an idea of the whole project and what I need to anticipate from the standards and how each phase of work impacts the next. And 4, your in commercial use could also be included in this section. So again, just being consistent. The statement for the standards does not have to be lengthy. You are basically triple confirming that you understand your proposed work will meet the standards. As for your work plan, the project and more moving pieces for more information you will need to provide. Don't get bogged down with the fine details such as which manufacturer the roof material is coming from. If you say you're doing a TPO or similar, I know your building has a flat roof. There will be some kind of parapet and drainage of those will all be items I will need to look for further information on as I move through my review. I do look to make sure all major components are included in a work plan. If I find that there is a missing piece or pieces that could change your work plan, I will include that in my review and notify you. At that point, you will need to decide whether you want to continue forth with your current work plan or withdraw your application and resubmit when funding is available. We will not be allowing amendments or changes to the work plan that go beyond small alterations such as which windows you are installing or responses back to my conditions recommendations, like instead of 5-inch LVT gray tone, you will be going with a 2-inch LVT would like. If you aren't sure, it is always best to check our websites for guidance. If it is about a proposed treatment in the standards, I am happy to chat, but please be ready to address all comments and needs at one time. I am not going to have multiple conversations as you get to each component. So we kind of went over the planning documents. So to kind of figure out what you really need, like ask yourself, do I have a small building? Do I have a large building? Again, what is the condition that it's in? Do you have a lot of historic material intact? If you do, then, and you're keeping it, maybe you don't need as much. But if it's completely gutted, you're going to need some kind of planning documents. And then does it seem like you are doing a lot of work with changing things out, making repairs, building out tenant spaces, etc.? You should have a pretty good feeling like, oh, this seems like a ton of work going on. Just think of how I feel when I'm reviewing your project. Like I'm probably going to want to have planning documents and to supplement your written work plan to have a visual aid. So while these 2 examples don't show all the details pertaining to each element in the drawing, it provides enough information for me to know that 1, the narrative sections for masonry, downspouts, new construction, windows, etc. should be included in the work plan. And then 2, I need to take this proposed interior floor plan and compare it with the current floor plan to see how they are moving any doorways. What are the proposed finishes for the corridors and units? Why no elevator, etc. The applicant needs to describe all that work in their work plan and make sure it aligns with the supporting documentation. For photos, there are certain items that are needed in order to understand a project, and photos are one of those. I try not to be too critical on photos, but I do need enough to have a basic understanding of the building and what you're going to be doing. While the feds and professionals have been trained to take photos from every angle of every room, not all projects require that detail. So again, ask yourself similar questions as the planning documents. Are you doing a complete rehab, or are you only a smaller project on one floor of the building? But if you're focused mostly on one floor of the building, don't forget, I still need the photos in the other areas that are not doing work, so that way we can make sure that you in fact did not do work in those areas. That will help guide how many photos you need and whether you need to be far up or far away or close up. So for these, this is a great example showing a faraway view of one facade. I can clearly see there's a lot going on with this wall, which triggers me to ask multiple questions like structural integrity of the wall, how porous is the brick, what condition is the masonry in, what is going on with those windows, and more. While I don't have a clear view of the water damage or windows from the photo on the left, the photo on the right is a closer up photo showing in greater detail what is going on. Now I have new questions like that window, is the window openings remaining? Will the window be replaced? What are they using to clean the brick? What is the cause of the parapet damage? Most cases, water intrusion due to lack of capping and proper roof install. But this is a good contrast of far away, up close, and in the scenario of when you need to provide additional photos. And then take a moment and look at the photos. What do you see? Can you determine what components are historic or non-historic? These photos tell me a lot. It tells me that at least this space floor is really intact and would be expected that all extent finishes and circulation patterns need to be kept. I didn't include the photo of a room that at some point had linoleum placed over the wood flooring, but the applicant proposed removing the damaged wood flooring where it couldn't be salvaged and replaced with tongue and groove, since it was a small area versus the full floor replacement. Another key feature is the transoms. While they were covered up at some point, they were left in place. Depending on code and whether you're changing the use of the building, you may be able to restore the transoms and install a fire suppression system if needed. If there is no change of use, we have found that not all code officials and fire chiefs require a fire suppression, or at least not one that is top tier. Overall, you need to make sure your narrative work plan aligns with what I see in both your planning documents and your photos. Remember, work plans take precedence over supplemental documents. And I throw it back over to you, Christopher. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I did want to address Keith's question. I know Diana's been answering him. I just wanted to say, Keith, when you have a gut rehab, you're right. Like, you don't necessarily have to repeat yourself for every single room. You're probably going to approach things more from a feature standpoint where all the windows, you're going to address those and say, there's 3 bedrooms where I have to replace them, but the rest of them are going to be repaired. I will say, as a side note, you've done pretty well of this in the past, so I don't see this as a huge red flag for you. But to help other folks, if it's a complete gut rehab, you can take it more as a feature rather than room to room. And then if there is, one room that's absolutely trashed or something, it's good to point that one out and say this one needs a whole bunch more work for whatever. And then to Sarah's point, if you're going to be moving walls or changing the flow of the spaces and stuff, obviously those things are going to need to be described and pointed out. But other than that, you bring a good point. If it's a gut rehab, you can take it more from each structural component rather than from each space. Because it is going to be covering the whole building. So hopefully that helps answer that question. So yeah, starting off with changing a submitted work plan. Sarah already said this, but I'm going to reiterate this one. It's kind of a big deal. So when we reserve tax credits, it's important for people to understand that that is a reservation based on a submitted work plan, and that's the way the statute puts it, right? So we're looking at a complete work plan. We're saying, okay, this makes sense that you've given us estimated costs. And we're saying, okay, we're going to reserve that amount. Once you change your mind, that reservation is somewhat meaningless, because once you change your plan, that changes everything else as well, right? Like, that's going to change your estimated costs. And we cannot just simply change your reservation, because, again, going back to the very first slide, that affects our first come, first serve rule. So you really need to be ready. And getting back to that, even if we haven't reserved you yet and you're just in line, changing the work plan is very much indicative of the fact that you were not ready to submit when you submitted. And that's not fair to have someone else still changing their work plan and getting a tax credit waitlisted or reserved ahead of someone else who very much did fill out a full application and was ready. And so that is part of the reason that even if you have not been fully reserved yet, if there's a change to the work plan, we need you to withdraw and reapply. That is the reason behind that. And that is statutory. And that is why it takes another application fee. It needs to be a completely new submission. So we do get that question a lot. But yeah, you're going to need to withdraw and reapply for the reasons I've already said. But to go through this list, a complete work plan was not articulated. It's also likely changes the requested amount, which could affects our pools, right? Like, you've seen the large pool close within like 85 or 90 minutes. Well, we're counting up your estimates. So if we get all that in and we close the pool, and then you say, oh, I have additional work, well, that's going to put us over our statutory limit, and we're not allowed to reserve that. And for that alone, we would deny the application because we no longer have room for your application. So that's worth mentioning as well. This does create an excessive amount of engagement with program staff, a lot of emails. I think some of you would be surprised that to articulate an email for some things can take up to a couple hours sometimes. Making sure that we've gotten the actual correct information to give you, we're speaking clearly and not creating more confusion. So what may seem like a simple question sometimes does create several hours of work on our end to make sure that we're very clear. Now, that doesn't mean don't ask us questions, but I'm simply saying that when you want to change your reservation, that engagement is very time consuming, and it's just doesn't provide a fair platform for everyone else who's applying. And this obviously creates unnecessary wait times for all applicants who are waiting in line to be reviewed. And again, going back to our original point, this prevents people from filling out place saver applications because it costs to apply, right? And so if it's not full and you know that, you're kind of willfully donating to our pool of funds. So these are the reasons why we don't allow changes once you've submitted. Okay, so changing approved project phases. We've had situations where people say, I'm going to need to do this in 2 phases of work. We do require that you tell us up front what those 2 phases look like. Now, the big detail that Sarah just went over as far as work plans and things like that, we only need that detail for the current phase that we're looking at, but we still need to know what the plan is for the second phase and what the overall use of the building is going to be. You know, we can't look at something that says, well, I'm going to definitely do this in phase 1, but in phase 2, I don't know, I might do apartments, or I might have a daycare, or I might even just do a restaurant. I don't know yet. That is a plan that is not planned. And that is very much a reason for denial, because we don't know what you're going to do, and neither do you. And we're not going to reserve funds until people know what they're going to do with a building up front. So I think most people can understand that that's fairly reasonable. So is there a world where I planned 2 phases and now I may need 3? That could occur. I wouldn't count on it, and I'll tell you why. We're also very much leaning on issues where the statute, I'm trying to get my words together, sorry, the statute is very much says that you must satisfy your work plan. And we've been for years, we've been like, well, okay, you couldn't get to this component, that's okay, don't do it, come on in for issuance, you can put that into your phase 2. And we're getting a lot of pressure to remove that stipulation, partially because that's not statutory, that's just us being nice. The statute literally says you need to satisfy your work plan, and so we are turning that ship around now. If we have had arrangements with you and we have made other arrangements for a current project, we're going to stand by that. We are not pulling the carpet out from underneath anybody. But what we are letting you know is any new project starting in January with phasing, you're going to be held to your work plan. Well, all projects will be held to their work plan starting in January. So if you were in a phase 1, you had to move something to phase 2, we approve that. That's going to remain in place. We're not changing our story on you or anything like that. But we are letting you know this is a big ship to turn around, and we are turning it around. So starting in January, plan on completing your entire work plan if you want your tax credit. That is basically how it's going to be. So if you need to change, could there be a world where we had phase 2, but we actually need a third phase? Yeah, you could be introducing work that we never noticed before, or something additional that just was not intended. And now to do what we intended, we're also going to have to do these things. We may look at that and say, yeah, I can see a third phase there, but I certainly wouldn't count on it. I certainly wouldn't whistle past the graveyard and just keep working on phase 1 and 2 when you already see this problem coming forward. You need to talk to us immediately about it so that we can figure out the best way to handle it. In some cases, you're going to be better off to withdraw your current application and reapply with a modified so that you can include that stuff. That's why it's important to talk with this right away. So changing pre-approved project phasing is going to be really risky. It's not guaranteed, and I don't recommend you do it. If it's necessary, get with us and let's see what we can do. But once an overall project has been articulated into phases, it's difficult for us to warrant new changes to that. So statutory expectation of work plan satisfaction, as I mentioned, work plans must be completed before the credits are issued. Like I said, we've been treating this fairly loosely, but we are no longer going to permit that starting in the 26th policy. New and unforeseen may be permitted in another phase. But as I said before, please discuss this with both of our offices so that we're all on the same page. We have often seen folks, played, I don't like what dad said, so I'm going to ask mom. And they go back and forth between offices in an attempt to get the answer they want. And, you ask enough people enough times and you will hear an answer that you want to hear. whether it's accurate or not. So I definitely warn against that. Make sure all of us are on the same page so that you don't have anything to worry about. All right. So again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because Sarah just took you through a very deep dive on this, but just a final word on complete work plan. Submitting an incomplete work plan will result in a denial. Work plans missing any of these components will be denied. So again, you'll need to list out all of your features numbered and listed by name. Each of them, you'll need the current condition summarized for each of them. You'll need to describe all the work to be done for each of them. We'll need to see photos of all of it pre-rehab, appropriate construction documents or drawings as Sarah explained in detail. And don't forget those estimated costs for each of those components so that we can see that you have a workable plan. Okay, now this is the fun part. This is what everybody's waiting for, right? The issuance. It's the whole reason we're here. We all want issuances. And I want to just say up front, our office, especially at OEDIT, we are the ones tasked with issuing tax credits. And we are the ones that communicate with the Department of Revenue and make sure that your tax credit actually is valid when you claim it. Things like that. And when you try to transfer it, we make sure that the ownership transfers. And there's quite a bit into that. And I want you to know that here at OEDIT, we take issuances very seriously. And what I mean by that is we know you're here for the issuance. We know that you need it. We know that these projects wouldn't take place without these tax credits. And so we know when you come in for issuance, you're kind of in a hurry. You need this money. You've got banks asking for it, or you've got purchasers that are saying, hey, where's my end of the deal? So we understand the levity of the issuance and how important that is. If they take a long time, some of it could be due to things that we've just discussed, having to navigate incomplete work plans and things like that. So please know that everything that we've been expressing today so far is literally to get to the point where we can issue quicker, because that is really what we're trying to get to, is get you your tax credit as quickly as possible, because the quicker we can get you an issuance, the quicker we can also get your transfers done. So it all kind of goes hand in hand with complete submissions from the beginning. So we want to make sure you have everything at issuance as well, because sometimes issuances are greatly delayed due to a lack of information. So for us to review an issuance request, all of these following statements have to be true. The structure is conducting commercial activity or is producing income on an ongoing basis. So if you decided at the end of it to sell your single family dwelling as a home or a condo, you are not an ongoing basis of income production, and you will be denied. That is not the point of the program. So that is also the reason we're having ownership use statements signed, as there seems to be some confusion about that. So we're making sure that we are very clear that the end result of any of these projects needs to be commercial or ongoing income production. The structure is listed on a local, state, or national register. We mentioned this even at the reservation point, but we're reminding you that since you're allowed to be part of the program, even if that isn't true, you're not going to get your hands on a tax credit until it is true. So at issuance, that's going to have to be a fact. So you need to make sure that's true. Also, all work meets the SOI standards. And as Sarah said, that means your whole structure. If you've been doing bad things outside of your work scope and we find out about it, it's going to kill your whole project, because the whole thing needs to be according to the standards. Okay. The work plan must be satisfied. No outside of the work plan. So in other words, you can't do things that were not in the work plan. You actually can if they follow the standards. You just won't get any tax credits on it. Okay. Obviously, if it's non-QRE, you're not going to get tax credits on it. Or if you're greater than 12 months, look back considered for credits. So most of you are aware that after, once we start again in January, applications received after January 1st of this year only have a 12-month look back. So if you have work prior to that, we'd love to hear about it, and we hope it went well, but we can't give you tax credits on that money either. So the CPA agreed upon procedures letter submitted with the cost worksheet attached as a single PDF. This used to be not a problem. It's becoming almost every submission no longer does this, and this is a requirement. So we will be making sure you submit these. We will not even review it until we see your CPA letter with the attached worksheet as a single PDF. We also expect you to send your cost worksheet submitted in Excel format separately. This is for obvious reasons, so that we can verify what's being reviewed and we can do our own math within your sheet. And then you will need to submit for issuance within 1 year of completion. Obviously, now that we have some people waitlisted, we are now seeing the situation where you're actually completed with the project, but you haven't been reserved, and so you can't apply for issuance yet. So please know that we do look to your benefit. We're not looking to pull out the carpet from anybody. So what we have done is in our policy, we have given you 1 year from full reservation if your project is already completed. So if you completed a project in October, but you don't get reserved until January of 26, you will have until that same date in January of 27 to apply for issuance. So that gives you plenty more time than typically. But if you're fully reserved, you have one year from the time of completing your project. And keep in mind, that's not when you paid the last bill. It's not when you had somebody say, hey, this was done on this date. Certificate of occupancy definitely tells me the project is done, but it is not necessarily the best marker of when things were done. Your cost worksheet will tell me when things were done because we don't really worry about when it's paid. We care about when you incurred the cost. So if your last cost was incurred, if the last work was done on October 12th, that's pretty much when your project was done. Now, if you give me a COO date of 3 weeks past that and we're going on that date, perfectly acceptable because I understand it takes a few weeks when the work is completed to actually get that COO. And I understand that. So we're not trying to give you a 24-hour window or anything there. But we have had situations where we have gotten cost worksheets that stop, in December or October of 23, and we're getting an issuance request in December of 24. That's way past the end, and a COO in November of 24 does not tell me that your project was not completed until then. It just tells me that it's completed. So usually this only happens when people have done really big projects. They feel no point to show me any expenses past that point because they've already earned their maximum credit, and showing me any more isn't going to help. But the reality is we need that whole thing for obvious reasons. Like I just told you, we need to know when the project ended, and that may affect your year-long wait date, and it may make you ineligible. The other thing is money's tight this year, and when we go back to legislation, which won't be this next session, but when we get a chance to ask for more money on your behalf, it's really difficult to make the argument when you're only showing us the work that got you the credit, because they look at that data and we can only present data that we have, right, guys? So if that's being done a lot, we're showing that the legislation, that the people that participate in this program do just enough to get a tax credit, and then they stop. And that is not the kind of tools that we want to have when we're asking for more money. We want to show that sometimes it's painful, and you guys have had to spend, in some cases, millions of dollars more than you are actually getting a tax credit for. That moves the needle, and that is where legislation feels like they're getting something done with the tax credit, and maybe it's worth a little more money. So I hope that explanation helps you understand why we do ask for all that work. It really is for your benefit. So please make sure, if you did the work, even if it's not qualified, please list it all so that we can go to bat for you and show you how much work you're doing for these credits. Okay. So yeah, to review for the issuance request, the following must be true. Going back, we're just taking these one by one so you understand them. The structure is conducting commercial activity or is producing income on an ongoing basis. How do I know that I'm sitting in my office? How would I know that that's true? Well, you can give me photos, media ads, of your grand opening, things like that. Point me to your Facebook page where you had your grand opening party or something like that. Show that there's an ongoing income production. You can show that to me through media ads, like your apartments are now for rent, or show me your first lease agreement with your first tenant. That will show me that you are leasing out these apartments, okay? But we do need to see some sort of evidence that there is ongoing income production or commercial activity going on with this property before we'll issue the credits. Okay, we'll want to know that your structure is listed on a local, state, or national register. If not, we'll rescind your reserve credits. It's just that simple. It's a statutory requirement. There's no argument. It's a very automatic thing. I won't even know about it before Sarah does. Sarah knows whether you're on there or not, and she'll point it out to me, and I'll rescind the tax credit. Done. So that one's about as simple as that. So again, this one's going to hit Sarah's desk before it is mine. I don't judge the standards, and that's a good clue not to ask me about the standards because you're not going to get a good answer. But when you come in for issuance, Sarah will know right away whether you followed her conditions or not for sure. She'll also be able to tell whether you did something that was not discussed or something outside of the standards. And there again, she'll leave a note on there and it'll ping me and I'll resend the tax credits. It's pretty much that simple. Okay, so the work plan has been satisfied. So we're going to be looking to see that I'm looking at your cost worksheet and I'm comparing that against your work plan. And I'm saying all the elements of the work plan approved for tax credits are completed as described in this work plan. If not, we're going to rescind the tax credits. It's that simple. We need to know that you did what you set out to do. Unfortunately, the freedom and the forgiveness we've had in the past has worked out to where it has been gravely taken advantage of, and the leadership in the office is no longer going to permit the loose management of this. So if it's in the work plan, it needs to get done. Work outside of the work plan, non-QRE, or expenditures that are outside of the 12-month look back, again, projects starting after January, or applications received after January, they'll not be considered for credits. So you can still submit all that so that we know it was done and you can get your credit. We just won't be able to give you any tax credits on that. And we are wrapping up. I know we've only got a couple minutes, so I'm going to race to the finish here. I think we about got it though. But in order for us to review an issuance request, we also need that CPA AUP letter submitted with the cost work attached. I described that pretty well. We're just not going to review it till you get us that. Okay, so it'll sit there until we get it. And your 90-day review period that we have will not start until we get it as well. This is why we're reviewing what a full application is, because we need that before we can start the review. Okay, separate cost worksheet. I explained that one already. For obvious reasons, we need to be able to do our math as well and compare it to the one that you gave the CPA. And we can't start reviewing until we see that again. And then make sure that you submitted within 1 year. I was very, very long-winded on that, so I think we're pretty clear what that means. But again, I can't give you a tax credit if you don't apply on time. So that's pretty much it. So I'm not going to read through all these. These are the ones we started through. I'm sure that we're pretty clear on all these, but these, if any of these is missing, this application is not considered submitted, and we cannot start that 90-day timer for our review until we've actually got a full submitted issuance request. Okay, if the application is not considered submitted and the 1 year time limit for submission expires, the reserve credits will be rescinded. And that's what we're trying to tell you, is that we need a full application. Putting something in as a placeholder does not get you past timing dates. Okay, so again, the 90-day review period doesn't start until we get everything we need. Okay, so only listing part of the expenses on the cost worksheet. I went over that. It causes major delays, extra costs, and it gives us bad metric data, as I mentioned. Not following the standards. Pay attention to History Colorado's conditions. We see sometimes that people seem to have not even read those, and I think it's very important because you will lose your tax credit over it. Missing the 1 year mark for submissions, submitting an incomplete issuance when progress report is due. Look, we've had people do this. This doesn't get you out of the progress report. Putting in a placeholder for your issuance request doesn't mean you no longer owe a progress report on time. Okay, so do the progress report when it's due and do your issuance request when you have everything to give us a complete submission. Okay, unclear or bundled cost worksheets without clear incursion dates. I'll just send that back to you and tell you, give me something back that makes sense. We have to be able to read what you've done and compare it to the work plan. And if there's no ongoing commercial or income producing activity, that will lead to a rescinded tax credit at the worst, or no ability to review it at best. Okay, so when we get together in late November, early December, we'll go over the new webcast. We'll give you a webcast date coming up soon. We don't have that today, but we will tell you about the new portal rules. We have several rules on how to apply coming in January. We do have a new set of policies that we'll be able to give out. We will have new program materials like cost worksheet that have been updated, and we will definitely tell you the pool opening dates and times for things, and we'll remind you of that. Sorry for going a minute over. I want to thank you all for joining us today. These are very important issues. We want you to succeed, and that's why we take the time to do this. But we want to have a better experience for everybody. So we are cracking down, so to speak, on some of this, but it is really for the benefit of all, not to go after a few problems. We're really just trying to make sure everyone has a good experience and a fair shot at a tax credit.
If
So
anybody,
go ahead.
sorry, if anybody does have time, I did want to address Maria's question live. If you guys are able to stick around, Christopher and Sarah, Maria has questions about phasing and how smaller projects can handle phasing effectively to really maximize their time. And so the main question she has is if she has a project that is currently not reserved, when is she able to apply for issuance, and when is she able to apply for a subsequent phase of that project?
Sure. So we get this question a few times, and unfortunately, Maria, the answer is no. We can't take more than one open at a time. We have been asked why. It does seem unfair a little bit with all the waiting, but let me put it to you this way: if you knew, because you're asking on behalf of a small player, right? What if a large developer came in with a very large project and they decided to reserve all of our funds for the next 3 or 4 years in phasing a large development program? Then almost no one else would be able to participate in the program because they would corner the entire pool. And that is why we don't allow it, because it gets competitive to where people are reserving stuff years from now that we don't even know if they're going to realize or not. So unfortunately, no, we cannot permit that. But I can tell you that if you are finished and you receive a tax credit a year, maybe God forbid 2 years later, you can still apply it to those tax credits. You just have to amend your return later. So I will say that. And then as long as we're just on here real quick, if I don't know if Keith is still on, but as far as churches, that is a stipulation that we would require you to make a statement that it is open to public rental use. So if the public can rent your basement to have parties and things like that, we do consider that commercial use. But without a statement like that, you're correct. It's not commercial use, and we would deny the project.
Then I want to say one thing for Maria, and this could be applicable to a lot of projects is, I think, knowing that the State Historical Fund grants, a lot of projects rely on getting that grant in order to do the next bid. We do have examples of projects that have successfully combined 2, 3 scopes of work for their State Historical Fund grants into one application for the historic tax credit. So there's also that thought of, well, my project's phased for, State Historical Fund or other funding partners, but for the historic tax credits, that might not be the case. So also understanding how each of your funding revenues work and making sure that you're still within our requirements.
And then I see that Carolyn was asking for a work plan. Do you have something to give them, Sarah? Or do you want us to give the ones we have right now?
I am working on what I have. So, Carolyn, I can share that with you.
Yeah, the reason I asked, just to be clear, is we have a sample that we've been giving out to people to give a good idea of what we want. I'm happy to share that. We are part of the new documents we're getting out by the end of the year is a better template than we have. But yeah, Sarah has some stuff she can share with you to work on until those are official.
Yeah, I hope to make it fillable and easy to maneuver around. But yeah, I can definitely share what we have anticipated or not anticipate, what will definitely come for and expected for January.
All right. Well, thank you again. I appreciate everybody that's been here and following us on these webcasts. I know sometimes it's a pain, but we really appreciate the fact that you take the time to be with us and learn about the program so that you can be successful. Like I've always said, many of you have been around a long time. We love our job. We love giving out tax credits. A bad day is when we have to rescind a tax credit. So we do these to help you. Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.